Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the heart of Central Texas, it's Tuesday night, and it's time for Breaking the Chain. Tonight, we have special guest, James Viola. My name is Jeremy Walters. I'm an ATP, Master CFI, Major in the United States Army, Reserves, going through Command and General Staff College currently to promote to Lieutenant Colonel in a couple of years, aviation content creator, former A864 pilot in the Army, still technically an A864 pilot, but I just haven't flown in a couple of years by choice. And I'm a flight instructor. I love to teach. I love to inspire. And that's a photo of myself out on Lake Buchanan, Texas, teaching float planes with a student. I am supported by my beloved family of 7, including myself. That's my wife, Talia, and I have 5 children, Adam, Riley, Bryden, Charlotte, and baby Jeremy, standing in front of Miss Bessie Blue. I'm assisted tonight by Eric Day. Eric is a instrument-rated private pilot, passionate aviator, aircraft owner, and a software engineer. Okay, so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome Mr. James Viola. James is, he joined the Helicopter Association International as the president and CEO in January of 2020. And prior to HAI, he most recently served as the senior executive for the Federal Aviation Administration in the Office of Aviation Safety as the director of General Aviation Assurance. So his insight is very valuable to this program, and that's why I invited him to come on this program. He was responsible for maintaining the consistency of standardization in the application of safety oversight activities in GA. He was a government representative on both the International Helicopter Safety Team and the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. Colonel Viola, I'm going to call him Colonel because I'm still in the service. Colonel Viola's aviation career began with the U.S. Army, with the majority of his flying as a Special Operations MH6 and MH47 helicopter pilot. He was promoted through positions of increasing responsibility, achieving the rank of full bird colonel, and his final assignment was the division chief for the Army Aviation Current Operations in the Pentagon. Colonel Viola has a master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, a master's degree in international relations from the Auburn University in Montgomery, Alabama, and a bachelor's of science from East Stroudsburg University in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. He's also a strong advocate of general aviation. He flies as often as he can. He splits his time between flying the Robinson helicopter and an AG-5B Grumman Tiger airplane, depending on whether he's on a runway or whether he doesn't need a runway. Colonel Viola holds professional memberships of the Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Political Science Honor Society, Lifetime, the member of the Quad A, or Army Aviation Association of America, and AOPA, VFW, Military Officer Association of America, and the Society of Aviation and Flight Instructors, SAFE, as we all know, National Association of Flight Instructors, and Theta Chi Fraternity. Long laundry list of accolades that makes our guest tonight extremely qualified to bring his wisdom to our group. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinguished honor to welcome to Breaking the Chain, Colonel James Viola. Sir, you are up.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Well, thanks, Jeremy and Eric, for having me on. It's certainly a pleasure to join other fellow general aviation enthusiasts. Yeah, I love flying GA. I've also got my float plane, so that was reminding me I need to get back on the water again soon. Get back current in float planes as well. But,
so, sir, welcome again. And that's exactly why I asked you to come on. And I had General Cody come on, which is a friend of yours, friend of mine as well, a while back. He couldn't talk enough about you off the record, and said that you guys have a great time flying 44 and whatnot. And one of the things that really made me want to reach out to you is because you're an Army aviator and you're an avid participant in general aviation. Sir, can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in flying that wasn't in your biography? What really sparked your interest in becoming an aviator?
Yeah, well, I guess I became very interested as a kid. I think a lot of kids do, and and I did my best one time with another friend of mine, making some cardboard wings and tried jumping off a small garage. Of course, as you know, that didn't work very well. So it was something that I kind of always wanted to fly. And in high school, I was a votecher. So I was my dad's family was mostly carpenters in town. He had a bunch of brothers, so I was going to Votech just to be like him and learn a skill. And somewhere along the way, you got evolutions of decision. I decided I want to go to college. So that mainly the reason I wanted to go to college is because I was a runner and I won the 2 mile district champ. And so I was like, well, hell, I want to keep running. So I'll go to college to run. And of course, when you get into college and didn't have the money and so I decided I was going to do something, smart. I was going to enlist in the Army. And the funny part was, I went in and, I was finding out that if you wanted to fly, and it was Army versus Air Force, the best thing to do is probably go to the Army because they had more aircraft, more options. And so I told the drill sergeant that I wanted to enlist. I told the recruiter I wanted to enlist to be a drill sergeant. And boy, he got a good chuckle out of that. I was like, I'm a phys ed major. I like doing PT and I want to be a drill sergeant. I want to be a leader. Anyway, I got into the reserves, and one thing's led to another, and then Army Aviation Branch was coming out in 84, 85, and so I ended up being able to apply to Fort Rucker, and I told him that my phys ed background with East Stroudsburg was going to help me make some really good in shape aviators for the Army, and they bought it, so that's how I got to flight school.
Everybody's story is different. And that's why I like to ask that question, sir. I like to ask the question to my guest about things that most people don't know. Eric?
So, what would you say are some key roles that you served when you were in the military, and what were your favorites?
Well, I mean, we kind of military race through. You go to Fort Rucker, which everybody calls Mother Rucker. I still had the privilege of learning on the TH-55, and then I did the scout track. I always looked at those Cobras, and then my first assignment was Fort Bragg. And as soon as I got to Bragg, I thought I was just going to use the Army to get my flight training, and that I'd be off on my way as soon as my commitment was up. But as soon as I got to Fayetteville, I immediately started airplane lessons out of Fayetteville, and so I got my private pilot airplane at Fayetteville, and then I was with the 1st to 17th Cav, 82nd Airborne, and so although we're still flyers in the 82nd, you're also jumping, and so I got my jump master there. Following Bragg, I ended up going to I volunteered. The deal with the Army is you can wheel and deal. So I was like, if you give me Korea and give me Cobras, I'll go over to Korea. So I got the Cobra transition. Finally got into the Snake, which was awesome. I love flying the Cobra, and then I was able to command over in Korea, and I had 7 Cobras and 5 58s in my command, and it was no fly line. My butt is what we called it because we did Alpha Charlie. Delta sectors, which was up by the no-fly zone, and so it was really good to have that pretty early in my career. And then I knew, over there we did a lot of NVGs, and I knew because I wanted to try to get in the 160 Special Operations. And in order to do that, you needed a bunch of goggle time, night vision goggles. And so I got to the 160th in '91, and that kind of started my, I don't know what you call it, but it was like one deployment after another. The first thing I did with learned a lot of stuff is with Somalia in 1993. So it's where you really get tested on your mettle when you get thrown in a situation like that. So I deployed with a lot of the guys down there, and we left some people, lost some people in Somalia. And of course, the movie Black Hawk Down does a pretty good job of capturing that. When I got back after that, I had the privilege in 1994 to jump into Market Garden, jump into Holland with General Petraeus. Well, actually, at the time it was Colonel Petraeus and General Jack Keane. He was the 101st Commander, and I was a jump master on that jump, celebrating the 50-year anniversary. And that was like one of the non-combat things that was like awesome. That could never happen, again. That was like a once in a lifetime thing. After that, I went back to the 160th, and I was involved in the evacuation of Liberia with the MH47 Command, and that's when I met General Cody, because General Cody came to 3rd Battalion 160th because he wanted to interview me for a second command, because they had an issue, and it fits into some of the breaking the chain of they had just got some new E model 47s at Campbell, and they already had flown 2 of them into the ground. So there were some issues with crew coordination, flying glass cockpits, and that type of stuff. So he did hire me to have a second command, and I took over A Company, 2nd Battalion of the 160th at Campbell. And so those were some pretty neat things. And you thought I might have done most of it, but then after I went to the Air Command and Staff College, because I was trying to kind of, on the commission side, of course, Night Stalkers is always Night Stalkers don't quit. On the commission side, if I was trying to balance out, special operations, regular Army, and so it's kind of a little joke of Night Stalkers, I can't quit. So I went to an Air Force school and still got pulled back to the 160th, got pulled back to 2nd Battalion, and did another year at 2nd Battalion. And then, I was PCS and I was going to Fort Bragg, and that was during 9/11 hits. So the 9/11 hits and all the key people, because I was the new guy coming into Bragg, were deployed. There was a big exercise going on. And so within a week or two, I was deployed again as one of the lead planners for a lot of the hits that were going to Afghanistan. And I ended up being on the Kitty Hawk with a lot of the aircraft that did those strikes into Afghanistan. And it goes on and on. It goes back to Iraq. Then after that, so when I hit, I enlisted in the Army in '83. So when I had my 20 years, I thought I was going to get out, and then it was like, well, I got to wait for the war to end, and like, okay, well, the war isn't ending. And so eventually in 2008 is when I retired, but I really had a good bunch of opportunities with the Army, and it was really good to finish up, in the Pentagon, where that's kind of like, the ultimate of the, if you're going to be in a corporate world, that's corporate headquarters. So it was awesome.
Sir, I usually say this to my guests, but after hearing all of those stories of the things that you've done, I've got to say, truthfully, thank you for your service, for what you've done for this great nation. I was actually in college when 9/11 happened, and that is what altered my career path to go the route that I went. And I did 10 years of active duty service. I served at Fort Campbell. I commanded at Fort Campbell and first at a 101, No Mercy. I deployed as a 64 pilot to Eastern Afghanistan with No Mercy. And then I came to Fort Hood, and then opportunities came up, and my path went from, in the military path went, I can go reserves and civilian at the same time. And that's exactly what I did. And that's where I'm at right now. So again, a little bit off script. Thank you for your service. I sincerely mean that, because that's a pretty impressive resume. And the 1993 piece, I would love to hear you do a piece just on that at some point in the future, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. But that's really, really impressive. So
certainly, thanks for your service as well, and all the people that, it was very interesting to be in the military, a good amount of time when 9/11 happened, and then to see all the youngsters and everybody. I mean, might be calling you a youngster by accident here, but see everybody, raise their hand and come in and help. It was awesome. So I think I love our country, and I think it was great, and I thank you as well.
Thank you, sir. let's move more towards the GA side, I guess, because I could sit actually now that you started talking about all of these other stories, it makes me want to ask questions about Somalia and all these other things. But I guess we can maybe look to doing something else about that in the future. Talk to me a little bit about HAI and how pilots can benefit from it, and what kind of role of advocacy do you as a organization do to promote and protect general aviation?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question. Certainly you heard AOPA in there too as well. We all work together in the DC area. It's been kind of sad that we haven't seen each other now in person per se in over a year, but we're looking forward to some good summer events. But HAI also, we've got over 70 years. Looking forward to, you can never start planning too early. We'll be planning our 75th, celebration in 2 years. It was a small group of operators and Bell Helicopter at the time. They wanted to work together to support and develop a young helicopter industry. I mean, it was something new, and the airplanes have been around, but now you've got this, swing wing thing that had a lot of moving parts. So today, 70 years later, HAI has been working to be the global leader in leveraging, innovating, avocational, and expanding, the operational characteristics of a helicopter and what a rotary wing can do. That, as you mentioned, even in the intro, that if I don't need a runway to go there. I can do that vertical takeoff, I can do the flight, I can do that vertical landing. And a lot of it is, the good that it could do for society. And if you've flown, in Afghanistan, I know both flying in Iraq and Afghanistan, Iraq was, had such a good infrastructure. I mean, they had trains, they had all kinds of stuff for moving people around. But when you got to Afghanistan, that's where they really needed the vertical lift, where they can get something that can operate high in the mountains. And so it's a good that the rotorcraft will bring to society. So we try to represent not only the past, but also now looking forward to the VTOL, the vertical takeoff and landing industry, and also promote safety, professionalism, innovation, a lot of the stuff that, you are talked to here on your show. And that's certainly one of the reasons we want to sign up. And, when HAI started out representing helicopter operators, more normally like an operators versus individuals. But today now we also, advocate on behalf of the manufacturers, supply parts for the industry, and just tying everything together. And the big way we do that now, we do have a Heli Expo, an annual big trade show that we try to bring all the users of vertical flight together and show off the best wares. And also it's a good homecoming event now for aviation. And I'm sure you've been to Quad A. Quad A is, a good sample for the Army. I look forward to now spreading my wings a little now that I'm into the Helicopter Association. I get to actually pare back from my FAA job where I had all a GA, and I get to focus on a true love, which is the vertical flight stuff. So we also, one of the big things we do is our government affairs team at HAI. And, we want to make sure that there aren't overburdensome laws that, prevent industry from growing. And even during the pandemic here, they helped secure over 228 million in financial assistance to make sure that, tour operators and the such, that people weren't flying right now. We want to make sure that we're going to be around when things start picking up, when things get better at the end of this year. And they also work with the FAA and CAAs around the world to standardize programs. And they focus on, what can we do globally? And I think, one of the lessons learned here with the pandemic is that we are absolutely globally connected. And so we need to work together on a lot of this stuff. The thing you can't go without saying, though, is workforce development. Shortage of pilots, constantly getting pilots and mechanics training, and actually, helping my members understand that we are the future when it comes to, urban air mobility and advanced air mobility. When you got these vehicles that, again, won't need runways, but they'll need vertiports, they need infrastructure. And so that's a lot of the things that we work towards. And we also look at the military. One of the things one of the pleasures I had, I'll call it a pleasure, was when I had a temporary job in the aviation safety. I was the deputy associate administrator for aviation safety, working for Ali Barami, and I was working close with Dan Elwell, who was the acting administrator at the time, and we got to go over and brief Air Force Secretary Wilson. And we were briefing around the shortage of pilots, and got to hear what DoD was working on, how they were trying to make sure they keep their pipelines flowing for the defense of our country, both Army and the Air Force. So at our Heli Expo, we have what we call the military to civ transition, and we help military helicopter pilots transition from what it was like in the military and get your stuff ready so you can get a job in the civilian world. So that's a lot of that stuff I think that HAI tries to do for pilots as well as mechanics, because you need mechanics as well, and a lot of times they're overlooked.
Jeremy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. There's always something. I said, I think it's always really important to have pilots come together as a community to focus on the greater good for the sector of the aviation community. And the fact that you work with SAFE, and I'm actually a member of SAFE and AOPA, and now a member of HAI as well. And that advocacy piece is really important to protecting our passion in aviation, as well as promoting aviation safety and culture. Eric?
Yeah, when I was trying to, get the job with HAI, one of the guys I called was Mark Baker with AOPA, and I was said, hey, give me some mentorship here. I'd like to get this job. And he's like, no, you can't leave the FAA. You help us too much in the FAA. then he got serious and he talked about, hey, we got to stop, losing airports. And one of the goals I came in and I said, we got to stop losing heliports, and we got to let's start the growth of vertiports. I mean, people keep talking about this urban air mobility, but nobody's talking about the infrastructure and how we, if you're not going to let the helicopters in today, what makes you think you're going to let all those air mobility aircraft in the future? So we really got to work out that infrastructure piece.
Awesome.
What are some so when you think about rotor wing versus fixed wing, what are some commonalities in terms of approaches to safety or safety needs, and then what are some things that are you think are specific to rotor wing?
Well, I would say that the thing, aeronautical decision making seems to be the big link up. The human factors part of that is the same. I worked for a while with the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee, and they focus mainly on airplane type. And so I was an advocate when we pulled out from the international, not pulled out, but as part of the International Helicopter Safety Team, we stood up the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. Because the thing about, helicopters and airplanes were different before, because I think in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because helicopters vibrated pretty good and you had a big, the instrumentation in them, they weren't IFR. So there was a big gap. And I think that gap has slowly been closing. And now some of the new aircraft that we see at Heli Expo are amazing. Everybody's now got the digitalization up front. They got glass cockpits. They're able to do, one of the things is put some data in there for flight data monitoring, stuff the military did with HUMS. I think on the safety side, we're still after the loss of control is always the top of the list, and that's across the board. The inadvertent IMC, the airplane is a heck of a lot more stable. So the helicopter is always flown at low altitudes, ideally. And so it's interesting to talk to like the NTSB after an accident when they want to just hang pieces of equipment on helicopters. And I have to tell them, please don't say helicopter. Let's talk about the mission set, because there's about 70 different missions that helicopters do. Helicopter's a tool. The military helicopter is a tool. In the civilian world, it is as well. And then, of course, it can also be a VIP aircraft. So you really have to focus on the mission set when you're trying to work the safety issues, to make sure you focus on how can you make it safer for that mission set, versus if you just hang a whole bunch of equipment on a helicopter and that helicopter was sling loading and he wasn't doing FAR and he wasn't doing, taking passengers on back, then you're actually making it less safe, because now you got more weight that's really not helping them. So those are some of the battles where we differentiate between airplanes and helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Eric, did you have a caveat?
Yeah, I do have a follow-up. So you did mention IFR, for example. What tell us how does IFR differ between rotor wing and fixed wing? I know, for example, that it tends to be more prevalent that you'd fly IFR in fixed wings, and you kind of avoid it in helicopters. Is that a fair characterization, or is
No,
it?
that is a very fair characterization, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one of the things we're certainly working on. You know, the thing is, I talked about infrastructure, and so we talk about airspace. And again, when I was in the FAA and I was working some helicopter issues, a lot of the helicopter issues I tried to help out with were in Alaska. You know, Alaska's is a unique environment for aircraft. They really need aircraft, and they do a great work for society there. But I've recently been working with some of my members in the New York area, and really learned a lot more about how a lot of things they can't do. I didn't realize that, you know, a helicopter can't get that IFR clearance on the ground and just climb into a low altitude, because we really want low altitude IFR is what we're after. And there's some of those routes that have been laid between DC and New York and up to Boston. And the goal there is that, you know, you want to keep the helicopter, a lot of the helicopters, the newer ones, may be able to fly in light icing and such, but you really want to fly as low as possible. And now with GPS and TK routes, they're called, we can do that. But the issue we're having is we're not able to take off from the ground on an IFR clearance and be assured that we can go the most direct route, and then shoot that approach and have an alternate, because you really get into managing fuel a lot tighter in a helicopter, because you're always trading fuel for weight. And so if you've got to keep that IFR reserve on there, you know, that's some additional minutes, and you've got to be able to, you know, where is going to be that next approach, and where can I, you know, will you give me direct in a low altitude, or are we going to climb back up to a higher altitude that we don't need and just burn fuel? So those are some issues that have to be worked. And I think we're going to try to work with the FAA and maybe some of the other international countries that are really pushing the limits on airspace for the new advanced air mobility, and how we can ensure that if I'm going from point A to point B, because that's, you know, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at intermodal transportation of the future. You know, when you look at some of the Secretary of Transportation's goals right now for the future, they're awesome. And I want to jump on board, and I want to help. And we want to get away from the fact that we think that these quadcopters are replacing helicopters. No, it's another tool. It's another part of the intermodal transportation. Helicopters can go a lot farther than those vehicles. And so we're all going to work together. We're working with NBAA, the National Business Aircraft Association. You know, they're going to have their jet go to long leg. Then it's going to be a helicopter. Then it's going to be a quadcopter. So we're all going to work together for the good of society here. But we need to get some airspace, and the IFR will be safer in helicopters. And we got to bring the business case forward. But we need all those other pieces to come together. And that is being able to take off IFR from one of the helipads in New York right now. I've been told, you know, people are waiting 30 minutes, 45 minutes burning gas, trying to get, you know, an IFR clearance. So that doesn't work right now.
Understand, sir. One of the questions that one of the viewers, and by the way, viewers, please go ahead and feel free to ask all the questions you want, and we'll try to sift through and ask. One of the viewers asked, was it a mistake for the FAA to require all 135 helicopters to have radar altimeter without regards to a mission set? That was his question.
Yeah, no, that's an easy yes. And I mean, there's some way, you know, when you look at what is the risk, number one, what is the risk that you're trying to mitigate? And then the other one is, you know, let's go with the performance-based answer on that. I mean, the radar altimeters right now are, I mean, I'm going to say they're old technology, and they're heavy. Some of the new stuff on there, if you've flown glass cockpit, you know, I've got an Aspen in my Tiger with synthetic vision. And then the helicopter flies where we always pretty much have contact with the ground. So what do we need that radar altimeter for? At nighttime, zero illumination or over water, yes. Yeah, I'll go with the radar altimeter, because that's what we had in the 160, and then that's where you had two pilots as well. You know, on those zero illumination nights, that radar altimeter is sweet. But that was also before, you know, I had a map that was going to turn yellow and then turn red as I was flying as well.
Sir, would you take a moment, and if you don't want to discuss any particular scenarios, that's fine, but military or civilian, or maybe both, could you talk about an incident or an accident that you're passionate about where the human factors error chain was involved?
Well, there's always, you know, more than one thing, of course. The military one that is that always, you know, I always use a lot when in training. You know, you got to train really hard But it was interesting when we were training for Somalia, and we were training at Bragg, that we lost our best lead in the AH-6 because they were trying to do the bump, they were trying to do vehicle interdiction, and they just pushed too hard and they flew into the ground. So now here we are 2 weeks later, and we're deploying without our number one shooter. So it's one of those deals where you got to stay in the box, you got to know what protects you, and you can't go out there. You can't let it's just not right. Let's go around and shoot another approach. I mean, I'm a flight instructor in both, helicopters and airplanes, but in airplanes and same with helicopters, I like people to be bored on final approach. You should be bored and just waiting to land. Not you're going to pull it all together in the last 20 feet, and that's how a lot of it was done before. I mean, I did. I had out at Gaithersburg Airport. I had my Tiger, and I was in the last hangar, and a guy pulled his Mooney out the next hangar next to me, and he parked his car to a place where I couldn't get my low wing aircraft by. If I had had a Cessna, it wouldn't have been an issue. Well, this guy came back. I called. I didn't go flying that day. I made a big ruckus at the airport. As I'm driving away, I see him coming back in his Mooney. So now I'm yelling through the fence to him, and I'm like, I'm going to go talk to this guy. He was an older gentleman. And he had a nice Mooney glass cockpit G1000, and I was like, hey, you know how to work all this stuff? And we became good friends, but it was all about the risk. So now when I start flying with him, he was up in his 70s, and I tried to do some of the things we've done now with the new ACS, which is, hey, tell me what the highest risk is today for the flight. Well, what do you mean? So that whole thing of teaching people identify the risk. I mean, there's lots of risks. What are they today? And are we mitigating them all? I think that's been a good evolution, my time in aviation, from just trying to figure out, I'm following the checklist, I'm good. No, what are the risks we're going to see today that's not normal? Is it the wind? Is it the weather? Is it the ceilings? And those are all the things that, we talked about with the radar altimeter. To need a radar altimeter, if you've got 3,000 foot ceilings and 3 mile visibility in broad daylight, you don't need it because it's a 135.
Understand, sir. Very good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that point about just exercising your thought process to consider what are the risks. And I assume then also in flight recognizing a new risk that's starting to present itself is the same sort of training your brain and thought process for.
Yeah, and that chain thing, when you talk about pressure, I had at one time I took off. I knew where the weather was, I knew where I was going, and I had someone on board with me, and I was a flight instructor, and I had been teaching the risk identification, what's changing on the mission, what do we need to do to mitigate that. I looked at where the weather was. I was IFR flight. But the weather was not as forecast. It was moving pretty quickly, and it was pretty bad. But I knew I can get through certain area, talking to ATC, making decisions. I said, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to land at this location, and then we're going to figure things out. And at the time, the person next to me was trying to get to point B. And they're like, no, if we land there, we're going to probably stay there the night. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I understand. So we're going to push on further. So I'm like, we really need to land here. And they're like, no, because if you land at that location, because it was my hometown. So like, if you land at your hometown to check weather, we're staying there, and I don't want to stay there. And so all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I'm pushing on. I'm doing what I teach my students not to do. And I finally said, no, we're going to land. But now I was past that point. I ended up landing in a place that had nothing. I barely could get cell service, and we had to sit and just watch everything blow over and then take off in VFR. Versus make a good sound decision early and be able to, just regroup and go at it again.
So there was a question in the Q&A about the future of auto gyros and where do they play? You talked about a variety of different, vertical aircraft types. Where do they play a role?
Well, I will have a hard time answering that right now, but I'd like to learn more. I know there were some certification issues in the past that I tried to help with the FAA that I don't think whoever was asking questions probably still not happy possible with the certification of it. I do plan to go to Oshkosh this year and learn more from those guys that do a lot of good flying in the one section there. I probably didn't spend enough time down there. So I am open to learning more. If that whoever asked the question wants to drop me some information at president@rotor.org, I'll be glad to help out. And it's part of it. I mean, it's got rotors. We love you. I mean, HAI has always been operative focused. We're trying to just build membership, and we're trying to be more international, and we want to be more inclusive. So I welcome the question, and I'll glad to try and help.
Can you repeat that email one more time?
Yeah, it's president@rotor, ROTOR.org.
Okay. And you also mentioned flying into Oshkosh. And there's a follow-up question on that, which is about the safety of the current inbound process for helicopters going into Oshkosh. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've flown in both airplanes and helicopters. Nothing jumped out. I'd have to, they'd have to point out what they thought was the issue.
No, just the person, maybe you can follow up with a question, but it was apparently didn't think that there was the thought was it could be safer than it is now.
Well, I would say that the thing that surprised me was that if this is the issue, when I flew in with the helicopters, you didn't really talk to anybody. And I'm a 160th guy. I love not talking to people.
Sir, are you sure you weren't a warrant officer?
Oh man, hey, I'll tell you, the warrant officer. There's some warrant officer tricks out there that I've learned from. Certainly, we've been as commissioned guys. They're certainly our mentors, and
they're very good mentors.
I have to give a shout out to Cliff Walcott. Cliff Walcott was the first one that we lost in Somalia. And when I got to the 160th and I had these grand ideas on how this captain was going to do this field exercise, and I told him we were all sleeping on cots in a hangar, he's like, put his arm around me and goes, Jim, let's go talk. That's not how the 160th goes to field.
A warrant officer would never do such a thing, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm kidding, of course. We've actually got some warrant officers in this chat tonight. And so some of them are some mentors of mine as well. So they know the joke.
Yeah.
Awesome, sir. And you talked about the auto gyro stuff a little bit. You and Eric were talking a little bit. I've got a really good friend of mine here in Central Texas that's actually a designated examiner for gyro planes. He's heavily involved. He goes over to the factory, the Magni factory in Italy, and I actually went out and got my gyroplane add-on about a year ago. Unfortunately, I haven't used it very much lately. Yeah, I'm telling on myself because I'm not proficient in it. I'm going to go get proficient pretty soon, but I would love to link him up with your organization because it is definitely a very unique animal. And I love the fact that you're in auto rotation constantly. There's no rotor droop, so if the engine quits, right in. It's definitely different. No collective, but I'm sure you've at least gotten a ride in a gyro. So, but anyway, so composite risk management. Gosh, in the Army, I was not an Army aviator the entire time I was in the Army. I was actually a CFI airplane. I did everything backwards from you, sir. I got my airplane ratings out of pocket, Part 61, before I went in the Army, and got branched air defense artillery, ironically, before I became an Army aviator. And that's when I was introduced to the composite risk management system. And from that whole process and some of the exposure that I have run across with incidents and accidents, both in the military and the civilian side, the whole break in the chain piece has been a point of discussion for many years in aviation safety and safety in general. It was a incident that happened about 3 years ago that made me develop this program, basically focusing on the break in the chain mindset, the forward thinking mindset. In other words, let's not look back and see how we screwed up. Let's take lessons learned from the past and apply them to the future to identify the risk and snip the link of the chain and stop the incident from happening. That's really what this program is about. So can you talk a little bit about the formal risk assessment process?
Well, certainly risk management, as I touched on, and there's things that we're trying to work on with the with HAI as well as with the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. We've done, as I talked about the top 3 accidents, the inadvertent IMC. We got a program that came out. It's called 56 Seconds to Live. It provides a very similar scenario to the Calabasas crash, where a pilot faces pressure to complete a flight, almost like describing with my airplane flight. And the video, when we released it in February, it's already been viewed over 25,000 times. And there's many resources that are available with that program under the safety tab on our website. The capstone for this project, that 56 seconds to live awareness and the prevention course, is literally a few days away from being released, hopefully next week. It's a multi-phase educational program that puts the student in the pilot seat, and you get to experience the entire flight, including the consequences of the decisions that you make. And the course offers ways that you can change your story, the end to your story, and different actionable tips on how you can avoid that actual IIMC trap. So that's one thing we're doing. We're also with the HA Online Academy. We paired up with the FAA safety team, so you get wings credit. There's also, we're doing another thing. We've been trying to think about programs that can help so that you don't have to go out and create something yourself, especially as a small operator. And one of them is the Rotorcraft Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing, which is nicknamed ASIAS. And that's what we're trying to do with the VTOL industry, which is a lot of the stuff they've done. And that's how they got the airlines as safe as they are, is you actually got to collect the data and then be able to analyze it. And they want to de-identify it so that, we're learning lessons for our industry, but they're not going to be, a way to go after somebody or flying inappropriate because of the competitors can use against each other as who's doing things right and who's doing things wrong. It's all about just learning from the lessons and making sure we can apply them across the board. So that rotorcraft centric version it has been in the beta test, and HAI has been involved in that. And we're really looking forward to getting a cost effective ASIAS program out there that we can help in. Some of the larger ones like the heli offshores, they've had some good backing to do that information. They're doing it in their segment, again, in the segment, but really looking at how now with the Vertical Aviation Safety Team, or VAST, that's going to be an international part now. And I'm actually privileged to be along an ICAO rep, Miguel Marin, as a co-advisors. And the whole thing about it is just passing the information and keeping the information flow of what's out there. So when you do that risk analysis, that you've seen what others have identified and you can see where it fits in. And so, we certainly think we can get there with helicopters as they have with airplanes, 0 fatal accidents. I remember when we first came out and started talking 0 fatal accidents. Can you really achieve that? And I remember being on stage saying, all right, which one of your relatives do you want to give up? I mean, yes, we need to achieve that. There's nobody that's involved in this industry that's here to not be here tomorrow. We got to get everybody home. Safety above all is what we've kind of talked about when we talk about VAST, and bringing all the advocates from around the world, because it is the same. It may be a different language, but it is the same when we get to flying rotorcraft around. So that too is I'll throw another website out there, but VAST, VAST .aero should be up and running on Monday. And we're like on the cusp of a lot of the stuff we were running a lot of it, we were scheduled to have our Heli Expo in March at New Orleans, but now it's really given us some time to polish some of these rocks up. And I think in the next couple of months, there's a lot of opportunity. And if you're out there right now as an operator or a pilot, and you feel a risk that you don't think is identified, like anybody that's on here, you could shoot me an email at president.rotor@rotor.org, and we want to make sure as we do a FRAT, we're working on a flight risk assessment tool. Exactly what you're talking about, Jeremy, so that it we have to know what the data is there so that we can develop the FRAT that actually is pinned against data that we've collected for years in different types of mission sets. And then again, in the helicopter, that those mission sets are are what's been everybody's been struggling with, because in an airplane, if you're taking off from DCA and then you're taking off from Dulles and then you're taking off from from Texas, those are big runways. And yeah, all right, so they extend it. They should have touched down at the 1,000-foot marker. They touched down here, but helicopters are operating out of the middle of nowhere, doing different missions. And so how do you figure out data that can it only be used in that one mission set, or can it be used across 10 different mission sets? So that's what they've been struggling on.
Outstanding, sir. You said something just a moment ago that really kind of struck a chord with me, and that is when you look to your left and to your right, and how many family members are you willing to give up for this industry, and why we want to make zero accidents and zero fatalities a thing. And that is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with this program. The energy that I put into this program is for that reason, because one death is too many. And so thank you for touching on that, sir, because that's definitely one of the things that I'm trying to drive in on my community. Is we have to do everything we can as stewards, flight instructors, and pilots, as stewards, to prevent bad things from happening to our brothers and sisters in the air.
Absolutely. It's safe. I mean, how many times I hear how unsafe helicopters are, and it's not the helicopter. I mean, the manufacturers are doing all they can to try to build that stuff in. And I think now with the flight data recorders coming, and then having those programs in place so that you can once we get the digitalized stuff, you can go back and just try to be a better pilot by looking at your own data and see, what did you do there? Did you do something that was unexpected, and why? And then say, okay, yeah, I need to watch for that next time.
Speaking of manufacturers, Robinson has this stigma about being an unsafe manufacturer, and they're far from it. They go above and beyond to produce excellent safety courses out at the Robinson factory. And I'm sure you've probably been there, especially if you fly the 44. But
yeah, so I used to go to the safety course every 2 years as my CFI renewal, just to again go there, see what they have, meet with the folks down there.
Excellent.
You mentioned vertiports. Can you tell me why you made the distinction between what we would call a heliport or a vertiport? What are they? What are the challenges to getting them put in? Do you have the noisy neighbor problem?
Yep. No, it was. And if you've been watching the helicopter on Mars, as soon as that helicopter flew on Mars, number one, HAI, we changed our name for the day. We called ourselves Helicopter Association Intergalactical. And then, but then, all the jokes came in of, okay, now we got our first noise complaint because it flew on Mars and the Martians are not happy. But no, the heliports, working with the governments right now, they are calling, they're trying to transition. What is the word going to be? And it's probably the vertiport is more inclusive. We're still working with NASA, and there's some working groups that we have established at HAI that are tackling those issues. Fly Neighborly is a program that HAI has working groups with that are trying to work on that. I had a call this week with the National Park Oversight Group, and we're talking about the new technologies for noise and making sure that one of the things I do from my position is try to make sure that everybody's talking to each other. That so it's not only the Park Service in New York and California and Hawaii, but we all got to figure out what is it that we can do to get where we want to be, and it's not an overnight thing. And what is the true technology that can be available, and how soon should we actually all sign up? So we're still transitioning from heliports to vertiports. I'm looking for the opportunity to see where the first vertiport goes in, or where the new heliport goes in. We've had struggles losing heliports, just like ALPAs and NBA, are fighting battles to keep airports open. So the noise is an issue. Flying green is certainly coming as well. So we all just got to work together and put a stake in the ground, but it has to be one that's achievable, and we got to work together transitioning there.
Other than routing, are there any technologies coming along that can help reduce the noise footprint?
So they're still working on the technologies. I don't have any specifics that I would be able to pass. So we probably have more experts listening. But I tell you, like cities like New York, we want to find out what's possible. We want to be good neighbors. We bring good things to the to society. People are going to start using advanced air mobility vehicles and the drone deliveries. You got to be careful if you restrict a certain flight activities over your city. If it may prevent all your citizens from getting their Amazon packages as well.
Maybe that's the hook. No Amazon, no same day deliveries unless you let us fly in your area.
Total oddball question for you out of the blue, sir. Airplane pilots have no idea about this particular instrument approach, the point and space instrument approach.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is, just to kind of share a little bit of helicopter stuff with our airplane folks, and then how difficult it is to get something like that certified?
Yeah. So I mean, the certification is is going to be that I'd have to say it's just going to be hit or miss depending on who you're working with on both ends. Who do you have working the approach for you, and who you're working with on the government side. But the point in space, the first thing that comes to mind for me is almost like a contact approach that airplane guys might be familiar with, because essentially it says, okay, I don't have VFR weather. Well, for a helicopter, it means I'm shooting an IFR approach to that point in space, and once I hit that point in space, I either have the VFR weather and visibility to get to my intended landing, or we really need to abort and go back in. And that's when we get into the idea of, now do I have fuel to go back in and do something? And of course, one of the things that we have an option that it's a pride that keeps people from doing this. And it's not necessarily tied to the point in space approach, but it's a whole land and live program where there are so many opportunities because you fly a helicopter or a vertical aircraft that I have done that. I have done that. Actually, it was tied in with doing Operation Wounded Heroes with Cody. And again, the weather came a lot quicker. I went back and I sat and I got weather again. Weather was still coming, so I'm like, okay, it's not forecasted. Forecast says I can get home VFR. All right, I'm gonna go. So I'm heading home, and all of a sudden it's around that 5:30 time. It's starting to get a little dark. The visibility is not looking good. I turn around, I come back, I land in the field, I get my iPad out, I check weather again. I'm like, it says like right there over the hill, it's like 3,000, it's like 5,000 foot ceilings. Well, I mean, all I need to do is another half a mile. So I get up again, I start moving in that direction. I'm like, they're not looking good. I land in the field, look at the weather again. I said, okay, there's an airport that's a mile east of me. I'm just going to go land and be with some of my buddies. So I pick up again, I get up to the top of the trees, I do a 360-degree turn. I said, nope, staying here. And I landed in the field, walked to the house, and they weren't happy. At the time I was still working for the FAA. I gave them my FAA card and I said, would you rather me be dead in your front yard? My helicopter will be sitting here overnight and I'll be back in the morning. So, I mean, we have that opportunity now because you can always call Uber too. I mean, Uber's been a little slow with the pandemic, but I think they're coming back. But that's certainly a good option. And I was on the FAA side when Matt Zaccaro was coordinating with me, because I know when I first got to the Dulles FSDO, a lot of the airplane inspectors don't understand the helicopters either. When a helicopter has an issue, we do what's called a precautionary landing. I land in the field, I check out my stuff, and if everything's good, if I might have had a weird vibration, I might have had something that just, little spine, tingling in the back. I get down, you walk around, everything looks good. You take off, and you continue on your mission. Well, there was times where the FAA would go after them for, well, you landed because there was a maintenance issue, and there's no maintenance write-up, there's no corrective action, so therefore you flew an unairworthy aircraft. And so we really had to make sure that that wasn't going to be part of the land and live, that the FAA would understand that you're making a decision to land because you want to regroup because things aren't as they should be, and you don't want to do that planning at 90 knots, single pilot. A lot of helicopters are single pilot. A lot of helicopters don't have autopilots. I mean, I was coming back from from West Virginia, and I had a little bit of an issue in the cockpit, and I called the local airport who had a control tower, and I said, I just need to land for a couple seconds on the taxiway if that'll be fine. Do you need any assistance? I'm like, no, I'm good. I just need to pick up my iPad from the floor and put it back where it belongs in the window. So I wasn't going to try to do it while I was flying single pilot.
Well, from the standpoint of 91.3, sir, how does that apply from the FAA perspective if you have to put the aircraft down on a piece of property to avoid getting into a bad situation?
Well, a landing on on an other than airport or landing, well, I mean, you're talking about the specifically under that. What's the question?
You need to declare an emergency, basically.
No.
For the property issue, basically. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, I think as a precautionary landing, not necessarily emergency. You're just trying to check something out. We are HI. Just recently, we're in the middle of helping one of our members that the FAA came after because he landed at something other than an airport, and we got into a lot of confusion, not confusion, but debate, because we want to always make sure that we have the capability to do the land and live without declaring an emergency.
Otherwise, you have the opposite effect, which people will avoid it.
Exactly.
Until they know they need it, and that's not until it's too late.
Exactly.
So you are, talk to me about the integration with unmanned aerial systems, drones. You mentioned Amazon. Helicopter pilots, we've kind of got that buffer built in. We're not supposed to be fixed wing. We're not supposed to be any lower than 500 feet unless we're, approaching an airport to land, and drones aren't supposed to be any higher than 400 feet. But you're right down in there in the mix with them routinely.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think we really got to work together on the infrastructure and a lot of the things that are coming out now with the drones and being able to, announce not announce, but digitally tell where they're operating. And then, I know I've got a call, I think this Friday with Jay Merkel, who is the head of UAS for the FAA. We want to see, what has changed since the last time I was in there and how we can make sure that, it's the, I think our operators, and that's one of the things I'm trying to work with our members, that almost like the intermodal, if you look at the agriculture, so let's look at that segment. Mm-hmm. So there may be places where you want to use a drone. There's places where you want to use a helicopter, and there's places where you want to use an airplane. So we are so mixed in with those capabilities that we just need to all work together and make sure that we can operate safely. There wasn't going to be, there was total integration has been the FAA's mantra all along. So we've got to see if that's how it's going to go to the future. And that's, again, when we get into urban air mobility, and you've seen some partnerships going on with some of the advanced air mobility vehicles out there. How are you going to move those vehicles quickly unless we get the infrastructure right? And the best thing, I think, for checking that infrastructure right now is the helicopters.
Is that going to be just more ADS-B out, do you think? Or different technology? Just planning.
Yeah, I'd be going a little bit outside of my box if I tried.
Okay.
Let's understand, sir. Gosh, this hour flew by like a rocket. It always goes this way when we get a great guest. Sir, I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to give you the final remarks. What is Colonel Viola's definition of a professional pilot?
Well,
everybody's is different, so.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, certainly, you mentioned two of the good CFI things that both NAFI and SAFE are very good at making sure you understand, what a professional pilot is, and you got to have that continuing education for sure. I think one of the things that, you could start with a quote from Dirty Harry, which is, "A man's got to know his limitations." I'm sure that when Clint Eastwood delivered the line at the movie, in the movie Megan Force, he was not thinking of flying his helicopter when he finished working for the day. But one of the messages that we really need to get the pilots, professional pilots, should be confident in their abilities, but not arrogant. You know, you got to know what your experience is. You got to know what your training is, and you got to know what your limitations are and not overstep them. A professional pilot, you know, is somebody that, you know, I told you I got stuck in the weather and I landed in the field. So you got to be willing. Is that a mistake? Yeah. I mean, I should have probably stayed back where I was at Carlisle Airport and not tried to get to Gaithersburg. It's a half an hour flight, but, you know, just change my plan and learn from them that, you know, maybe what is each pilot's minimum weather standards? You know, I like flying the airplane because I can go out far in the airplane, and I don't have to worry about a decision. I liked in the military some of the training. You know, my pilots probably didn't like it much. And if there's anybody on here from my MH-47E days at Campbell, is when we came in, and if the airfield was fogged in, and I launched two Chinooks on the IFR routes down by Nashville, so that they can file the multi-mode radar and you can fly in the clouds at low level. I mean, and that's so they were well trained, you know. And I had some pushback from leadership when I started doing that, and I'm like, wait a second, we're going to get a call from the president of the United States saying execute, and you're going to tell me to do it, and we're not going to be trained to the standard we needed to do it because we're going to do it. So let's train. So you got to be well trained for the mission at hand, but also know your limitations. And then share it like we're doing here, like you're doing with your program, is share them with everybody that's willing to listen so that they're not repeated, you know, that everybody understands the capability of their helicopter, because, you know, there's enough versions out there, and stay within those limitations. You know, understand that you can continue to learn. I mean, that's why we have the educational courses at HAI on our educational site. And then also learn from the new pilot that comes in and asks some interesting questions that a lot of times, you know, people just haven't thought about. And then the key thing to get to that new person and that professional pilot is you got to be able to say no. And so, like Harry Callan in Magnum Force, a professional pilot knows his limitations, and you gotta know when to say no. And I've certainly, you know, had some tough discussions with people, even in the Chinook in the military, where, you know, I had a commander come in and say, you know, we need 4 more. I'm like, no, we're maxed out. No, I need 4 more on there. I said, well, what? I can get you 1 more. And he goes, well, how are you going to get me 1 more? I said, I start unbuckling my seat in the front. I said, you can have my seat, but we're not taking, you know, we're maxed out. So yeah, sometimes you just got to be the tough no, and you know it's safe, because the responsibility is you have to get them all back safe. And a lot of times in the GA world, I don't know if we should call them not professional, but there's been some safety discussions on, you know, people at airports that give people rides that the people getting in for that ride don't know, or don't even know what questions to ask to ensure that that guy has his flight review. And when was the last time he flew? Did you do your 3 touch and goes? I mean, so we need to do some self-policing as professional pilots as well, and make sure that, you know, the message to the larger society is, you know, we are professional aviation people, and we are safe as can be. And if you ride with any of us, you're coming home.
You couldn't say it better, sir. That, you know, do what's right when no one's watching, because the lives of the uninformed aviation public are in our hands. And so we have to exercise our due diligence to make sure that we keep everybody to the left and to the right of us in check. Sir, is there any final thoughts that you would like to share with us before we close out for this evening?
I'd just like to thank you and Eric for doing this. I mean, it does take work. You know, safety isn't free. We got to work at it. I mean, there's time that's spent. And certainly, like I said, you know, HAI on the helicopter side of things really wants to try to help globally. I mean, we have countries actually that don't want helicopters to fly in the country because they're unsafe. Well, it's not the vehicle. It's the maintaining of the vehicle. It's the operation of the vehicle. So I'm just really excited about the position I'm in and trying to help. So if there's anything I can do for anybody that's listening to this podcast or webinar, please, you know, let's do what's good for all of the rotorcraft community, the vertical lift community of the future. Let's welcome the new players, because the new players, you I got to go to what was called, so I told you I had the International Helicopter Safety background. I had the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee background. Then I did the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. And then we did the UAS Safety Team. And that was interesting because that was the first time we had our first meeting and we said, when you go into these other safety teams, you had an accident, you were killing people, and you're trying to figure out how to get better. For the drones, we went in there and we said, we haven't had an accident, we haven't killed anybody. How do we keep it from happening? And we have no data. So there's lots of challenges out there. So when these people are standing up that's it. They need to stand up aviation departments. And I think a lot of people have learned that now in the last 5 years. And they need to hire people like helicopter people who have flown in the low altitudes, who understand the aeronautical decision making of weather and some of the other things. So let's keep the workforce going. Let's think about the guys here that guys and gals that love vertical flight, and let's keep them safe.
Well, sir, I'm really excited to hear that you'll be at Oshkosh this year. I'll be there. And if there's anything I can do or anybody I can send your way to help promote HAI, I'd be more than happy to help as well, sir, because together we're doing really good things together. So
that's how it works. You got to work together. Everybody's working together. It's an easy pull.
All right, sir. I'm going to go ahead and close us out for this evening. Again, thank you, Colonel Viola, for participating tonight and presenting. Thank you all who joined in tonight. If you have any feedback or questions, shoot me an email at flyallamerican@gmail.com. Follow me on social media on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Join me May 25th at 7:30 p.m. as we welcome back Gary Reeves. This was a postponed event from back in April. We've moved him up. He's going to come and he's going to discuss EFBs, or electronic flight bags, and the glass technology. He's got a new book out, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Gary come to Breaking the Chain. So once again, once you've tasted flight, you'll forever walk the earth, and your eyes will be turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will always long to return. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for your wonderful support. See you 2 weeks from tonight.